Well, happy Wednesday, everybody. I'm thankful you've joined us for today's video devotion. I hope you're keeping up with the New Testament reading plan. Today we're in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, and not only reading the New Testament, but meditating on what God says to us and then writing about it in our journal. And God's been speaking to me. I pray He's been speaking to you as well as we learn to spiritually feed ourselves during these days of staying at home and just very unusual days. But I pray God's Word's been encouraging you and strengthening you. I know it has me. But I got to say today, I wanted to choose some of the verses that didn't hit me so hard, but I couldn't. God wouldn't let me. So today I want to talk about a verse that God used just to say, Steve, you've been blowing it. And so let me read to you verses 12 and 13 and then talk about it a little bit. Here's what Paul writes. He says, all things are lawful for me, but not all things are profitable. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be mastered by anything. Listen to that. I will not be mastered by anything. Then in verse 13, food is for the stomach, and the stomach is for food. But God will do away with both of them, the stomach and food. God will do away with both of them. Yet the body is not for immorality, but for the Lord. And the Lord is for the body. And some of you are thinking, all right, now, Steve, you're going to talk about eating too much and being out of shape and being overweight and being addicted to food and other things and not exercising enough. And, well, you're right, because that's what he talks about here. It's interesting. In verse 13, he says that God is going to do away with food and the body. The idea is that in heaven, we will not need food, therefore we don't need the stomach that processes it. Now, we're still going to have a body, a spiritual body, a resurrected body, and Jesus, after his resurrection, ate food. Remember, he ate the fish with the disciples on the sea, on the shore, but it's not because he was hungry or needed it. Don't need the nutrients that come from it with that new glorified body. So food and the stomach in that sense are done away with in heaven. And you'll remember Jesus in the Gospels tells us that there's no marriage in heaven. Men and women will not be given in marriage. So there's no marriage. So things in heaven are going to be different than they are here. And so Jesus is saying, think about this. If you don't need food in heaven, here it's just for sustenance. But the problem is we become addicted to it, don't we? We become mastered to it. And that's what he's talking about in verse 12 when he says, I will not be mastered by anything. And then in verse 13, at the end of it, he says, the body is not for immorality, but it's for the Lord. And I was writing in my journal as God was just smacking me upside the head and convicting me that, I'm not perfect. And for the most part, my life has belonged to the Lord. Not every moment, but for the most part, my life has belonged to the Lord. But I can't say that my body has. Never dedicated it to the Lord the way I have my life, and we draw a distinction sometimes between I'm dedicated to Jesus, my life is, but here he's talking about not being mastered by anything, including our appetites, our stomach, our food, because our body is not for immorality, but it's for the Lord. And so I wrote here, my life has been the Lord's most of the time, but my body, that's a different story. That's a different story. I've allowed my body to be a slave to my appetite for food, and it shows in my weight, in my health, in my appearance. And I imagine I'm not the only one who's been guilty of that. So brothers and sisters, let's just covenant together to start asking God to free us from the addiction to too much food. And let's be disciplined to eat healthier. And maybe during these days at home, because of the coronavirus, the COVID-19, it's a good time, a good opportunity to start eating healthier, cooking healthier. And I know when Monisa and I cook at home, we tend to eat better than when we eat out a lot. So maybe it's a good time to take advantage of this to start something new in your life. Now, I know you didn't tune in today wanting somebody to make you feel guilty because maybe you're overweight. Well, I'm looking in the mirror, so I'm not saying anything to you. I'm not saying to myself. But we're reading the New Testament chapter by chapter and saying God talked to us. Well, that's what he says there. And I can't ignore God's word, and neither can you. So let's come together and do better, shall we? God bless you, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.